Major funding for this program provided by the Moving Image Trust Fund. Additional funding for this program provided by the Arkansas Agriculture Department.
Hello, I'm Tony Brooks, and this is Agri Arkansas. Today we continue our look into agriculture in each of Arkansas's 6 physiographic regions. The Ozark Mountains cover most of the northern part of Arkansas and encompasses parts of 22 counties. The rugged terrain makes for some steep challenges in agriculture, but for many there is no other place they'd rather operate. Let's take a look.
Well, it's funny when you study the history of the Ozarks and the agricultural history of the Ozarks. One of the things you notice is that the earliest settlers who came to the region would often comment on the land, and generally it went something like, this land is no good for farming, but it's okay for livestock. And it took us about 200 years to get back around to where we agreed with those early settlers. What it boils down to is that the soil here and the terrain is just not that suitable for row crops. And it is pretty good for livestock raising. You got lots of rocky terrain, grass grows okay here, but there's just not a lot of that land like you get in the Delta where you're gonna be growing cotton and soybeans. The first thing to know about the Ozarks is that they're not mountains. Geologically, this is not a mountainous region. The Ozarks was formed over hundreds of millions of years by a series of tectonic uplifts and then by erosion. And the last of those uplifts occurred somewhere in the 25 to 30 million years ago range. And then over the millions of years that came after that, you had erosion. You had the rivers and streams that would form the hollers and the seeming mountains that we have today. A friend of mine who lives in southwest Missouri has always joked that the Ozarks isn't mountains, it's ditches. And really that's kind of what it is. It's just a severely eroded plateau that takes the form of mountains. But you can get on a high point just about anywhere in the Ozarks and you look across the horizon and all the high points are going to be about eye level. It's a very diverse region. Physiographically, you've got all the way from the Boston Mountains in the south, which look like mountains, kind of look like a smaller version of the Appalachian Mountains, to the Springfield Plain around Springfield, Missouri, southwest Missouri, northwest Arkansas, which is really reminiscent of a prairie or just sort of a flat version of the Ozarks, and then you got everything in between.
Our part of the Ozarks is very hilly and not rolling hills either. It's pretty steep, it's mountainous, a lot of rocks, a lot of clay. It's not something that you want to come and decide to row crop on, but it works really great for pasturing and wood raising animals. The type of farm that we have, because of the land that we're on, we can't do certain types of farming that's big in Arkansas. So we deal with what we've got. We roll with the punches. We're able to do wood raised and pasture raised pigs. We're able to do cows, chickens. That's something that's really easy for us because it's not flat. We can do a little bit of hay and a couple of pastures, but we don't have a lot of flat ground for that. But it does lend itself to raising some really good animals. The nut trees that we have beech nuts, we have hickory nuts, acorns, walnut, that all makes a really good pork. And that's something that's really catching on in a lot of areas of the world, is a nut raised pork. That's the way that our pork looks. It's not going to be something that if you go to a grocery store, it's not going to be what you're expecting. When you get a package, I've had people call me and say, oh, I think I got beef instead of pork. And I have to reassure them, no, it's actually pork. It's a really red, rich, marbled pork. It's not white. We don't do the other white meat. We do a red, strong, delicious pork.
This is Carroll County, and we're in the northwest part of the state. the Ozark Mountains, and in this part of the region, it's hilly, so there are lots of hills. The ground's mostly very little topsoil, but there are places that we do have, you know, several feet of topsoil, and there's some several inches of topsoil. So, but most of the ground around here is grass. Primarily industry is broilers and beef cattle. They kind of work together out here because this ground at one time wasn't very good for much, but with the poultry industry striving and the nutrients, we made this ground very productive for us. So farmer in the Ozarks, up here the weather changes every about 5 minutes. I mean, we get a lot colder than they do in the south. We get a lot more snow and ice up here than they do in, you know, other parts of the state. The weather can turn on you pretty quick. We've been blessed this year and have a very wet spring. It's kind of dry on us here this fall going, but we're catching up. I think we're 2 or 3 inches deficit, but right here in this area. But it has its challenges, like with everything else. So
in the Ozarks, there's a great challenge. The weather is the greatest challenge we have. You know, we get lots of rain in some times of the year, and then it shuts off. The last 2 months we have had hardly any rain. So I've been feeding cows hay in October when they should be grazing grass. I was raised in this area. My daddy was raised, my grandpa was raised. We're all raised right here in this valley, and I guess that's one reason I wanted to stay here. I've been other places and saw other things, but I liked where I was at. We normally have about 250 mama cows. We're trying to increase our herd because I've got a young fella coming on. Spencer, my son, is 18, a senior in high school. He is becoming a young auctioneer. He wants to go right on with what I'm doing, so he's trying to increase his herd along with our herd.
A lot of the challenges is the weather, and then also at the market, whether the market's going to be good when they get big enough to sell, or whether you're going to have to keep them longer until the market changes. We raise cattle, and then also I have a sheep operation. I've got some ground rented to keep them on, and then also I've got some around our house. With the sheep, it's a little bit harder to keep the parasites and everything out of them and to keep them healthy.
Here in the Ozarks, because of the mountains that we have to enjoy, that's one of our challenges, but it's also one of our greatest assets is our location. The Ozarks are beautiful. We have 1 million visitors a year to the National Park Service where we live, or where we border. And so you have to, if you're going to farm here, you have to be creative. You have to take what you've got and do the best you can with it. If I was going to be a wheat farmer here, I would probably go out of business really quick. But because we have diversified and do as many different things as we can here on the farm, it keeps us going.
I think to me, the defining characteristic of Ozarks agriculture in the early 21st century is the small beef cattle farm. It's this kind of, it's almost a sort of democratic agrarian tradition that people in the region have. It's not what brings in the money, but it's so widespread and ubiquitous. You just drive through the Ozarks and you see cattle and fields everywhere along highways, and the majority of those farms are small family farms with 35 or 40 or 50 head of cattle. And they're not full-time farms. They're farmers who really have an off-farm income, or they're, one of the spouses will have an off-farm income that kind of supports the cattle habit for them, you might say. And to me, that, because it is so widespread, it's a link to an agrarian tradition. I think a lot of people continue to raise cattle because their parents did and their grandparents did, and it's a way to stay connected to the land. And for me, nothing better exemplifies modern Ozarks agriculture than that.
We'll talk more about agriculture in the Ozarks in a few minutes with Harrison Pittman, who is director of the National Agricultural Law Center at the University of Arkansas, and Misty Langdon of Our Green Acre Farms. But first, biosecurity. The recent outbreak of avian influenza was the largest animal health emergency in the history of the United States. Poultry producers in Arkansas are stepping up their biosecurity measures in an effort to avoid potentially catastrophic consequences of a large outbreak.
Avian influenza is a very devastating disease for poultry. It's a very challenging disease for us as a response agency, not only us, but the industry and USDA, and it is a very damaging disease for the economics of the Arkansas poultry industry and the national poultry industry.
Avian influenza is a viral disease, and it is carried by wild waterfowl and shorebirds. It is spread in those birds. It's pretty much just a low-grade gastrointestinal infection, an infection of the intestines. It will be shed in their droppings. The concern is that you could track in the virus if you had fecal material on your shoes and things like that.
Basically what it looks like is you would see turkey farms, with thousands of birds in the barn, and say at noon they would be completely healthy. Absolutely no clinical signs of anything wrong, and 2 hours later you might see 50% of those birds sitting down on the ground with obvious health issue. Believe it or not, 2 to 3 hours later, 75% of the birds would be dead.
In Arkansas, we were fortunate in that we only had one case of high-path avian influenza. That was in a turkey flock in Boone County. That flock was depopulated, and we did not have any other outbreaks after that. Now, there was surveillance work ongoing. Anytime there's an outbreak of a disease such as avian influenza, there's a quarantine put into place, and then there's surveillance of flocks inside that quarantine zone. Nationwide, the first reported case, to my recollection, was in December. Then we had multiple cases in the Midwest, Minnesota, Iowa. A total of over 48 million birds had to be depopulated. That was turkeys and backyard hobby flocks of chickens, a few flocks of those, and the majority was table egg chickens. Iowa had a huge number of birds depopulated. Some of their premises reached over 1 million birds. In fact, I believe some of them were 5 million birds. The economic impact has been considerable, shall we say. Of course, there were trade restrictions placed on states for poultry products by other nations. In Iowa, it's my understanding that they lost about 8,500 plus jobs. The cleanup cost to USDA, I've heard figures of over $700 million, approaching $1 billion in cleanup costs for getting the disease under control.
Initially, USDA came out with some estimates. They were predicting at least 500 outbreaks in 20 different states. We knew that with Arkansas being as large as we are in the turkey and broiler industry, that we needed to take as much precaution as we possibly could. We have developed an avian influenza library here at the Poultry Federation. We have participated with the other poultry federations and created a website called All In or All Gone. And when we say all in, we mean all in with biosecurity. And we're pushing out messages on a weekly basis to the farmers and to the companies, trying to make certain that folks know that you have to be all in on biosecurity, or there's a risk you'll be all gone. When you take your revenue stream out of your livelihood for 180 days, most folks can't stand that. And the key is we're going to have to change the culture of the farmers, our service techs, the folks who service the poultry farms, anybody that would be entering that poultry house. The culture is going to change because we're going to have better biosecurity, which includes different boots for inside the house versus outside, not associating with other growers. In Iowa, there are 2 brothers, both had poultry farms. They will not even have Sunday lunch with their parents, just trying to avoid any contact, with the flu that might get traced back into the house.
Of course, the hope is that we will have no outbreak, ever, for that matter. If we do not have an outbreak this fall, then that's great. And I'll say that not just for Arkansas, but for the nation. Naturally, if there was to be an outbreak in any other state or even in Arkansas, then the educational outreach efforts and other things will come into play. The virus does change, we know that, and hopefully this will just disappear and we won't have any problems with it anymore.
That website, once again, is allinallgone.com. Folks in and around the small town of Fox, Arkansas in the Ozarks may have recently noticed a familiar stir of activity in the Meadowcreek Valley. The Meadowcreek Project, a 1,600-acre learning laboratory of ecology, resilient food systems, and health and sustainable energy, has seen many peaks and valleys over the last 30 years. Many of the facilities have fallen into severe disrepair, but there's now a new focus to restore the infrastructure and revive the property.
This is Meadowcreek. This is a sustainable community that was established back in the 70s. The main purpose was to be able to establish a community that was able to sustain itself within itself without as little outside help as possible.
The tomatoes are down here somewhere.
Well, we're about 2 hours north of Little Rock in the Ozark Mountains in Fox, Arkansas. A very small community. If you're driving on the highway and you sneeze, you'll probably miss it. But it's, you know, it's up here in the mountains, and it's been known as a sustainable community. You know, right now it started in the 70s, and what they've planned was to make it a sustainable community, and they built some structures and even a conference center, but things sort of fell apart, and we're still in the process of rebuilding it and, you know, trying to bring it back in. There's some new people coming in and living here and trying to start up businesses and working together and seeing what we can do. There's an area down over the hill where there's a barn, and I'm not sure, it's probably, I'll say 20 acres, I don't know for sure. And then we have our little plot of land where we're farming right in the middle of it, about an acre, you know, size of a football field. And then there's maybe 5 houses. 3 of them, we're living in one of them. There's 2 that are pretty livable. There's one that needs a lot of work. And then they got a couple dormitories. One's functional, another one needs a little bit of work. And then it's about, as far as we'll say there's a 200-acre pasture where one of the farmers in the area is renting out. And then there's a lot of woods. It's really under the umbrella of the Humane Society, and there's a 9-board member who's really in charge of it. And then there's maybe 400 acres that's functional for farmland and for, you know, people to come in here and you know, occupy and do what they can.
I was first introduced to this via a friend, and he had me come down about a year ago now, and I did a lot of volunteer work. I helped develop some dams and build the lower gardens. And more recently, I've decided to move out here and help build small industry. We're building a smokehouse, we're fixing up the marketplace, and starting a small permaculture farm just on the other side of this house here, out on a 5-acre plot. And beyond that, I'm really interested in the educational and infrastructural development side of it here. We've got a lot of opportunity to start teaching better farming practices, developing new cash crops, and new low-impact cultivation means that we could use to provide jobs here, but also throughout the Ozark regions, be able to build agricultural infrastructure and better farm practices, and also have educational events here. And we've got facilities to do so here on the premises.
Meadowcreek is a place that is really trying to become built as a sustainable community where people can bring like an incubator, sort of. You bring your businesses and you can function and you can help one another, but you really got to, at least as of now, be sustainable for yourself and your own family and your own business, and how it can incorporate with others.
If someone is interested in becoming part of Meadowcreek, they would apply to a 9-member board by presenting their business plan of how they would independently make a living here and to sustain themselves here, and how that would be, how that would evolve inside of Meadowcreek as a whole. For example, when Tim and I come and visited Meadowcreek, we had an invitation to come. That was not a sure sign that we were going to be moving here. We had to present a business plan to the board members, and they had to approve the business plan before we were actually able to move in to Meadowcreek on a permanent basis?
Yeah, I mean, we've been here for almost 2 years, and you know, we really like it. We like the people who come here, and you like the seclusion. It's peaceful. The scenery's awesome. We have a big window at our kitchen table where the sun just makes the bluffs golden in the morning. But it's a great place if you like your seclusion, because you need to be some self-motivated, and you got to deal with ticks and chiggers and all that. But as far as it's peaceful, and people, when they come here, they want to work together. And so it's a nice place if you like the rural. If you like the city, and you're probably not going to be comfortable here, but if you like you're comfortable with being outdoors and even with a little seclusion, it's a place to be.
For more information on Meadowcreek, visit meadowcreekvalley.wordpress.com. Joining us now is Harrison Pittman, Director of the National Agricultural Law Center at the University of Arkansas, and Misty Langdon of Our Green Acre Farms. Harrison, I want to begin with you, and my family background, as we were talking, is from the Ozarks, and I recall my father saying that folks who lived there pretty much were engaged in subsistence farming, maybe a couple of cows and hogs and chickens and a few acres to scratch out some corn. That was that way for a long time, and it's changed somewhat now.
Oh, it's changed completely. It's changed dramatically, and gone from subsistence farming to really global production and processing, operate on a world scale out of those same rural areas. It's a remarkable story. We
were talking about in Carroll County, the primary production is broilers and cattle, and here again, we've seen this before on the program where the poultry comes in, but then the byproduct of the poultry, the chicken litter, is used to enrich the soil, which enables the cattle operation to succeed.
That's exactly right. One depends on the other. There's a very good relationship between them, and the agronomic value of the poultry litter. That is a byproduct of that part of the industry.
And some of the farmers there prefer to use that as commercial fertilizer.
Absolutely.
It does a better job. What are some of the more creative agricultural ventures that you've observed in the Ozarks?
Oh, it's hard to pick from. I think any of the farming that occurs is creative in its own right, but some of the things I've seen would be along the lines of what Misty does, and operating a really diversified operation and engaging in direct marketing, looking at value-added products, and some of the work I know that we've done through the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture with the Arkansas Food Innovation Center. A lot of the products I've seen there, working with small producers to get products that they can add value to, package, get the nutrition labeling, and out into retail markets and even internet sales. I think that's been something that's impressive to me.
Right. Misty, we're going to talk more about what you're doing in just a moment, but a point that was made in that, Harrison, was that most farmers in the Ozarks have to have an outside income to be able to continue their farming habit, and it was referred to as their link to their agricultural heritage. In Arkansas, there's a strong sense of pride in working the land, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. You have a lot of family history. A lot of this land is, your first question about subsistence farming and how it's evolved. That family lineage and that connection is still there, and it offers not just a way, but often the way that those families can stay on the land and be parts of that community and contribute.
Okay, I want to switch gears here and talk about avian influenza, and Arkansas poultry producers are taking this very seriously, and for very good reason. We heard that last spring, Iowa, they had to euthanize 48 million chickens, and in Minnesota, 9 million chickens and turkeys had to be destroyed. We talk about how important poultry is to Arkansas, and I was just looking at some numbers. We're number 2 in broiler production with a revenue of about $3 billion. We're number 3 in turkey production with a revenue of about $416 million. And we're number 10 in egg production with $439 million annually. So this is big business, and it's a tremendous threat.
Absolutely. You think of everything that goes into production, from the transportation to distribution. Of course, there's the farmer at the production level, the processing level. It's all huge, and when you have an impact like that and interrupts that chain, especially in a business model where profits are marginal, it has a huge impact. And in a broader picture, you have on one hand, you have global trade. international trade where countries can shut down shipments of our products into their country, and that has a huge impact. But also at a broad level, the interrelationship between the feed grain industry, your row crop side, and what goes into animal feed. And so if you have a reduction in the number of animals, you have a reduction in the amount of demand. And that can have a ripple effect that can play out as well. But everybody from the truck driver to the chicken catcher on out to the farmer, the landowner, the banks, the processor, everybody takes a little bit of a hit when something like that happens.
And this is not just in the huge poultry houses. Misty, you're having to deal with this as well in your operation.
Yeah, our biosecurity is a little different. We don't have to worry as much about our chickens and poultry, but our pigs. Last year, the PED virus was huge, and any pig producer they were terrified because they didn't know where it started. They didn't know how it was spread. So it was a really big deal. And for us, it was as simple as we just monitored who came on the farm. And because of our remoteness, we don't have a lot of visitors that are uninvited. They can't get there. So it helps us to be able to keep that level of traffic out.
Okay. Tell us a little bit more about Our Green Acre Farms. How did your operation get started?
Well, I started the farm in 2012 with just an idea to make my own food, to produce our own food. And I grew up on the farm, so we'd kind of quit farming for a little while and decided to get it started back up. And we're a 6th generation farm, so we don't stay out of farming for very long. It's something that's just kind of ingrained in us, and it's part of our heritage.
And you talked about the quality of the pork that you produce, and is it partially due to the diet of the hogs? They have the nuts, but this is a particular breed of hog.
It is. The genetics plays a large part, in my opinion. What they eat plays an equal part. We raise the large black pig, and it's a endangered pig. I always say that there are more pandas in the world than there are large black hogs. Yeah. And we're members of the Livestock Conservancy, and we consider ourselves a conservation farm. So we want to do what we can to promote the breed and to keep them from going into a more critical status.
Okay, and you've marketed your product. Tell us about how you go about marketing this, because this is a very unique product.
It is a unique product, and I'm not big on the marketing end. I like to be the farmer. So we do a lot of direct sales. We do a few small farmers markets. Social media is a big, a big tool that we utilize, as well as just word of mouth. And when people find out that you're raising this type of hog, they just kind of come out of the woodworks to look you up. We have pigs that were born on our farm that are in Canada and in, I think, 13 or 14 states in the United States. So.
Okay. What are some of the different revenue streams that you have? I know you do other things besides just the pork.
We do. We try to be as diversified as possible because of the land that we have. We can't do a lot of certain types of farming that a lot of people in the state of Arkansas are popular. So we do maple syrup, which I think we're the only farm that actually sells maple syrup in the state. There's a few small families that actually get out there and do it. And we do soaps. We do a lot of value-add products, soaps and scrubs, lip balms. Value-add is a big deal for us. Right. And we do honey. Most of the products that I use, the beeswax, comes from our bees. So we try to keep everything as local as possible.
So a very diverse operation.
Yeah, very diverse. And when it comes down to, it's a farm-to-table operation, and we're looking to put food on our community's table, not so much on a global level, but on a local level.
Okay. Well, it's been a pleasure having both of you here, and these are very interesting topics, and hopefully we can have you come back sometime.
We appreciate it very much.
That's all the time we have for now. Thank you for watching, and we hope you'll join us again next time. For Agri Arkansas, I'm Tony Brooks.
Major funding for this program provided by the Moving Image Trust Fund. Additional funding for this program provided by the Arkansas Agriculture Department.